This is the Skip Bayless Show, brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So the first time I laid eyes on Larry Bird, I was in the press box, you ready for this, of old Miami Stadium, which was the spring home of the Baltimore Orioles. I'm talking baseball. And I was typing a baseball column on Sparky Lyle. This was during a Rangers-Orioles spring game. This was March of 1979, and Sparky Lyle had just joined the Rangers after 7 big, bad years with the New York Yankees. So as I typed, I kept glancing up at this little TV mounted up on the wall. I kept watching this blonde guy for Indiana State. I kept thinking, wait a second. Is that Larry Bird guy? Sound completely turned down. So in those days, there was no way to watch an Indiana State on TV. This was my first glimpse. I'd heard about this guy. I didn't even know if he's black or white. It's a white guy. Really? Okay. But this was the regional final against Eddie Sutton's Arkansas, featuring Sidney Moncrief. I'd written columns about Sutton and about Moncrief for my paper, the Dallas Morning News. So I was rooting for Arkansas. And I was having a hard time concentrating on Sparky Lyle or that spring training game that was going on down below me. Bird didn't look all that imposing physically, didn't look like he'd ever touched a weight, but he was in the midst of scoring 31, grabbing 10 rebounds, all below the rim. And little Indiana State hung on for the upset 73-71 and was Final Four bound. The moment it ended, an Indiana State fan ran onto the court. This was on television. Ran right up to Bird, about to get in his face. And Larry Bird decked the kid. Just stopped him and dropped him in his tracks. Quick punch. Boom. Right in the jaw. Imagine if the odds-on favorite for the Wooden Award, which Bird was at that point, if he did that today on television. Whoo! But in those days, it was here today, gone tomorrow, no internet, no social media. And by the way, a week later, on the Sunday before the championship game, when Bird actually won the Wooden Award in Salt Lake City, Bird didn't even show up for the ceremony. They were steamed, those people who ran the Wooden Award. I wrote about it. I criticized Larry Bird for not attending, but nobody really seemed to care. Blip on the national radar. In those days, the NBA Finals could be watched only via tape delay very late at night in the East. And the Final Four was still just this cute little college event that the country didn't really care that much about. But I sure did. I was about to cover my first Final Four in Salt Lake City that next week. I obviously wanted a closer look at this Bird character, a bird's eye view of Larry Bird. All I knew for sure at that point was that this guy played by his own set of rules, and this guy did not care what anybody else thought of him. I had no idea what I was getting into that Saturday. Then that Monday night, March 26, 1979, that's 46 years ago. I couldn't fathom, I couldn't feel, I couldn't know. I was covering history. I didn't know I was right there in the middle of an event that would put both the NBA and the Final Four on the national map. I completely understood how a huge segment of the population had fallen in love with Magic Johnson and his big $1 million Hollywood smile. Who knew he'd be destined to become a Los Angeles Laker out in Hollywood? I'd already become a Magic fan. I could see on TV playing at Michigan State, but what I failed to grasp was that a huge segment of the population had become mesmerized by this Larry Bird, this hick from French Lick, as in Indiana, this hick from French Lick who had worked as a garbage man in high school and college, who had decked a fan and stiffed the Wooden Award ceremony. Whew, what? Now, I'm just guessing some white people like Magic. I don't know. I would think they would have, but I don't know. Did some black people like Larry Bird? Maybe they did. But this I'm pretty sure of. The country was being polarized between the black star and the white star, who could not have been more culturally different than the black star, though their games definitely had similarities. Both were 6'9". Both were gifted passers. Neither was sensationally athletic. Bird was the better shooter, but Magic was his equal as a scorer. And both were basketball assassins, natural-born winners, had basketball genius. Only Magic was more of a wolf in sheep's clothing. He smiled while he snatched your heart. So that Saturday against Mark Aguirre's DePaul, I watched the whole game. Bird went 35-16-9. Indiana State won by 2, 76-74. So the stage was set for Monday night's championship showdown, Magic versus Bird. Magic would have more help because Greg Kelser, his teammate, went 4th overall in the draft. But that night, Magic outscored Bird 24-19. Magic went 24-7-5. Bird 19-13-2. Bird had 6 more turnovers to go with the 11 turnovers from Saturday's semifinals. So he had 17 total turnovers in 2 Final Four games. Whew. But his 4 teammates might as well have been full-time trash collectors. They were just guys who were often literally blindsided by Bird's passes. Somehow, as I sat there courtside, I'm press row, right up against the court, that March 26th, that Monday night game, it seemed so much smaller than it would be remembered. The game was played in a little college arena. It's called the Special Events Center at the University of Utah. It seemed to me like just another college game without the usual ear-splitting hysteria I had often experienced at college games. Go to Fayetteville, Arkansas, and get your ears blown out as I had. So in those days, Gil Brandt, who was the Cowboys draft master, ran a hospitality suite at the Final Fours, allegedly, so he might discover a basketball player who could play football, and he'd had a couple, starting with Pete Gent from Michigan State, tight end. So Gil Brandt sort of ran also college basketball. He often plugged coaches into openings. All the ADs knew Gil Brandt. He knew all the top coaches, schmoozed with them, hung out with them. Bobby Knight and Dean Smith and Al McGuire, they were all there that weekend, that Saturday night in Gil's hospitality suite. So Gil told me on Sunday afternoon that many of the coaches had told him, the greatest coaches had told Gil Brandt, that Larry Bird was just, and I use the quote, too slow-footed to make it in the NBA. That was the quote, too slow-footed. So in a piece that I wrote for the Dallas Morning News for that Monday morning's paper ahead of the national championship game, I did mention in that column what I had been told that many of the top coaches believed about Bird, too slow-footed to make it in the NBA. Was I ever about to look bad? That next week back in Dallas, I got bombarded with hate mail. It was like Larry Bird had become an overnight god in America. I was stunned. Only now do I look back and grasp the magnitude of that turning point moment I walked into and didn't didn't feel, didn't grasp, didn't understand. Yeah, Magic was made for Hollywood, but now he had the perfect foil figure, the hick from French Lick, who could play, who could back it up. I mean, I had loved some white players before Bird. Loved Jerry West, Rick Barry. I was head over heels for Pete Maravich. He was godlike to me. He was literally magic. But somehow Larry Bird had connected with far more white fans than any white player before him, like by far more fans. And the rest was NCAA and NBA history.